Jebel-Irhoud fossils being reclassified as modern humans is a manipulation. And recently this manipulation is becoming more and more frozen in time. What consensus notes, or rather cannot negate anymore, is the discovery of similar fossils across Africa. Like the fossils from Omo Kibish in Ethiopia, and those of Florisbad in South Africa. For consensus, this suggests a more complex and widespread evolutionary history for Homo sapiens than previously thought. For consensus, it challenges the notion of a single origin of modern humans in East Africa and points to a more Pan-African phenomenon, with populations potentially expanding and contracting across the continent over time. In each of these cases, several fossils are found close together. Each such find clearly was a kind of a one-time off, not the result of some significant expansion. It certainly does not indicate an out of Africa, because there seems not to have been an in Africa at the time. All these fossils exhibit a mix of archaic and modern human traits, and not the traits of ancient Africans or first Africans, with evidence suggesting their presence in the region for at least 20,000 to 30,000 years. It is also very notable that almost all of these one-time-off finds are in mines. This should suggest these fossils arrived over oceans and or seas from one or more other continents, and this in order to mine. But nobody seems to suggest or to care. All these fossils not being Neanderthal, Denisovan, Homo erectus-like, also genetically, is very improbable. Among ancient DNA researchers, Neanderthals are known to have carried mitochondrial Eve DNA or mtDNA-L, this so long before the African mtDNA-L came to exist. Neanderthals are known to be atypical for sub-Saharan Africa, this even so for consensus. The general public could have forgotten that by far the majority of such fossils were found in Java, Indonesia, as well as in other parts of the world, particularly in Asia. This clearly makes sense, because this is where the highest concentration of archaic DNA today is found amongst modern humans. Technically, or rather genetically, there is no difference between Neanderthal and Denisovans, and not even between them and modern humans, and after all that is exactly why these three are called sister groups. Supposedly no DNA of Homo erectus was ever sequenced, but morphologically they fit the above three sister groups, and consequently are so-called modern humans. All sister groups are associated with haplotype B006, and haplotype B006 is the first in line in the haplotype tree, directly after the ancestor of all humans. Further and very importantly, haplotype B006 is genetically very similar to the ancestor of all sister groups, as well as of all humans, and clearly is human, although a slightly less mutated one. This first line, haplotype B006, differed from the ancestral haplotype by only 4 new, derived, alleles. It is noteworthy that his first line, haplotype B006, has its highest frequency by far in the Americas, and amongst 5 continents the second least in Africa. As was to be expected, the frequencies across the continents are in line with all ancestral markers. An allele is a specific version of a gene or DNA sequence. Humans are diploid, meaning we have 2 copies of each chromosome and therefore 2 alleles for most genes. The majority of these variations are single nucleotide polymorphisms, SNPs, where a single base pair differs, and small insertions or deletions, indels. Studies using whole genome sequencing have identified millions of these variations in the human population. For example, one study found over 275 million previously unreported variants. Consequently, the difference between the sister groups and their direct ancestors is not even a fraction of the 1% that makes us individuals different. So do not expect us to have directly descended from a chimpanzee, or any other animal for that matter. Certainly not so at all in the last 600,000 years. Expect any of the sister groups to have descended from a human. That would make us humans at least 600,000 years old. The day that Homo erectus would be considered one more sister group, we humans are provingly at least 2 million years old. That gave us plenty of time for us to have exhausted our key resources on the continent we were actually living on, and go or send hybrids or specialized classes to mine in other continents, obviously initially on the periphery of that continent, possibly extended by rivers inland. Even if you would only superficially check, that is what you would see across all continents, and this even significantly more so as in the case of Africa. Proof against out of Africa, and against Jebel-Irhoud being modern humans. In other words, mitochondrial Eve DNA or mtDNAL being carried by the Neanderthals is a clear proof against out of Africa, and against Jebel-Irhoud or any of the similar fossils being modern humans instead of Neanderthals, or any of the above-mentioned sister groups. This is simply so because mitochondrial Eve DNA, the supposed African Eve DNA, was carried by at least one of the archaic sister groups long before, possibly and probably over 500,000 years before it was carried by Africans. The also supposed Adam DNA is a quite similar case. Genetic Adam, or the Y chromosomal most recent common ancestor, YMRCA, is the male ancestor from whom all living men are descended. Scientists estimate he lived in Africa roughly 236,000 years ago, according to Wikipedia. This is determined by tracing the Y chromosome, which is passed down from father to son. Adam DNA is a quite similar case as Eve DNA and was also carried first and exclusively by one or more of the sister groups. But that is the subject of another video. So the evidence against out of Africa, and against Jebel-Irhoud fossils being modern humans, is confirmed already by only considering the only two sex-related DNA types. In fact, sex-specific inheritance patterns. The much larger and much more important whole genome DNA, systematically neglected by consensus, this for obvious reasons, is further evidence against out of Africa, as well as against Jebel-Irhoud fossils being modern humans.